Welcome to Cigar City Radio, episode number 54. I'm your host, Randy Ojeda, and making the magic happen, a man who unbuttons his button-down shirt, letting that chest hair flow, Mr. Jason Solanas.
Man, I love hot sauce, dude.
You do?
Yeah, the hot sauce at George's place was so good.
Tasty, right?
Especially when I was and it gave me the warming sensations.
Somehow that made Siri go. Like Siri's responding.
We should ask Siri what she thinks about this.
She says, ooh. It literally says, ooh. Hey, you, Cigar City Radio listener. If you're listening to this show and you like it, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Cigar City Radio. Also, please subscribe to our mailing list to get music, info, and news and everything sent right to your inbox. Algorithms be damned. Just go to cigarcitymanagement.com/subscribe. You'll find the link there where you can put in your email address. We'll send you cool stuff, but we won't blow up your inbox, we promise. It's all very tastefully done. Like our show, right? Our show is very tastefully done. This episode of Cigar City Radio was recorded at Creative World Recording in Largo, Florida, one of the best music production studios in the Bay Area. You can go to them for all your recording, tracking, mixing, mastering needs. Basically anything that you need with sound, you can do it at Creative World Recording. Again, they're in Largo, Florida. To make an appointment or find availability, you can call them at 727-593-1510, or you can find Creative World Recording on Facebook. We've got a bunch of new releases coming out for you in the next couple weeks through Cigar City MGMT label services. Just last Friday, we released the EP from Ethan E. called 10 Eagle Street. Great little album there. We also have a new EP coming out from Julia Powell called Rice in a Bottle. That comes out this Friday, the 27th. If you're a fan of the show, you'll remember our episode with Julia Powell just a few weeks ago. We also have a new single from Brooklyn producer Love Skills called What About Us. That's also coming out on Friday. Not to mention all the stuff we've been putting out the last couple weeks. New EP from Mama's Batch. This album from SoupBone, that's fantastic. Live Greg Billings records. So much stuff coming out through the Cigar City MGMT label services. To keep up with all of it, follow us on Spotify. Search for Cigar City MGMT or subscribe to our mailing list at cigarcitymanagement.com/subscribe. Our guest on this episode is George Harris. Man, what do we even say about George Harris?
The fucking legend.
The man himself. We've known George for a good chunk of our lives, and he's always been good to us. He's helped us in every musical endeavor that we've ever done in some way. Like, he's just that dude. There's a lot of people in the music scene that owe so much to George. He's just a really great guy. And, you know, it was so fun to sit down and do this interview because I actually learned a lot about George that I didn't know. You know, and anybody that knows George knows that George can talk a little bit, right?
But he never talks about himself.
Yeah, no, he doesn't talk about himself that much. So I felt like going in, I was like, I've already heard all of George's stories, but no,
I had no idea.
No, and honestly, like we could have sat and done an extra hour or two with George, or maybe we will. Maybe we'll have to come back in the future and do a volume 2, volume 3, just because he is an endless vault of information and knowledge and wisdom about most things menial and and trivial. No, George.
We can do a hot sauce episode.
Oh, we should definitely do a hot sauce episode with George and Sauce Boss. We'll get Sauce Boss.
Dude, that would be great.
Yeah, Sauce Boss. If you're listening to this, give us a holler. You can find George in Largo, Florida, Creative World Recording. He also plays in the Greg Billings Band and works with a number of other projects. Some of the best music coming out of the Bay Area is because of George. So find him online, find the Greg Billings Band, and download the new SoupBone album, self-titled SoupBone. We'll play some more of it for you at the end. So here it is, episode number 54. Legendary to this show, at least. You've been mentioned quite a few times.
And you've mastered songs that we've featured on just about every single show.
That's true.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. We're actually right now we're working on mastering the new Parrot Dream record, which Parrot Dream does the theme song for this show. So, kudos to them and kudos to George to help give them what's our word of the day? Crunchy. We're trying to give them a crunchy sound.
Crunchy works.
Crispy.
No, not crispy. That sounds like a breakfast cereal. Let's go with crunchy.
Crunchy. All right. Crunchy sounds more like a breakfast cereal.
Crunchy
delight.
even in milk. Ren and Stimpy, gritty kitty.
So George, I want to start at the beginning of George Harris, right?
Wow.
And
I don't remember that. I can.
You don't remember?
I don't remember the beginning of George Harris. I don't think I was there.
You were floating around
I
somewhere.
would hope not. Yeah. You weren't really
Swimming around somewhere.
Yeah, you weren't at the true beginning. But no, I've heard you say before that you were born on an Indian reservation.
No, not born. I was born in Kansas, man.
You're born in Kansas?
In Wichita, Kansas.
I mentioned this the other day, and Josh Lampkin was like, Iowa, definitely Iowa.
Yeah, I know. I heard that. I heard that one. That was good. No, but I lived in Iowa for a while. I lived all over the place, but I don't remember Kansas. I never, I probably spent at most a year there, and then my family moved. But the earliest memories are when we lived in Arizona on the Indian reservation.
Okay,
yeah,
so that was in Arizona.
That was grade school. Yeah.
So what was that like growing up on an Indian reservation?
It was cool, man. It was at the top of what was then the top of the Sonora Desert, in south of Mesa. And, we were really poor. So check it. We lived on an Indian reservation with musicians. That's how poor we were.
Wow.
Musicians are poor enough. Well, we were like the next step.
You were like the poorer musician.
We had to live with the musicians.
Oh, okay.
And it was cool, man. That's how I learned to play music. The drummer in the band that my father was a motel manager, so there was a band at the motel, and I went there one night, and he saw me tapping my foot, and he came up to my parents. He said, "I want to teach him drums. He's got a good time."
Yeah.
And they were like, "Anything, just get him away." Sure. So they did that, and that's where I started playing music, was in Arizona.
Really?
On the Indian reservation.
And it was drums at first?
Yeah, well, no, first it was phone books, really.
Okay.
It was phone books, and then I came home one day from school, and there's this little kiddie drum set, and I started playing at the club when I was 6.
Yeah.
With the band. It's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, 6-year-old drummer singing Winchester Cathedral and shit.
That's awesome.
I guess. I don't remember much of it, man.
So how long were you doing that? How long was that was me, sorry.
Wow. I don't know. We went to I guess maybe a year, and I was going to grade school there, which was a trip, going to grade school on the res made Columbus Day interesting. Mm-hmm. But it was, it was really a cool place to grow up there because it was such a hodgepodge. It was like Mexican cats and black people and, obviously, Native Americans and me, the token white guy. But I remember we did that for a while. We got, there were some articles in the paper and, the AP picked it up and we went and did Mike Douglas show and stuff, for a minute. It's all, I don't remember any of that, man.
Wow.
I know it happened. I saw pictures and stuff, but it was I remember walking into this giant TV studio and it was so enormous that it just freaked me out. My little mind couldn't handle it. The ceilings were the sky high, and these lights and stuff. And it freaked me out. So I don't remember much of that. And then we had to move. My dad was a motel manager. And he was a fix-it guy for Holiday Inns. Mm-hmm. So we would he would work at a place and then set up a thing where they would be profitable and we'd split and go to some other place that needed his services. And we'd live at the motel, And so we went to the next place and, it was just like that.
That's
Couldn't take the drums. It was, you know.
You couldn't take the drums?
No, hell no.
So how did you stick with music over the years, moving around as a kid?
Well, it was weird. When we finally got to Iowa, I think I might have been 8, something like that. When we moved to Iowa City, or Coralville actually, which is like outside Iowa City, but it's Coralville in Iowa, which is a trip.
Yeah. Do they even have corals?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was underwater at one point. There's coral there. And some guy came to the door one day and said, "We'll get free accordion rental if you take accordion lessons." My mom was like, "Sold, get him out of here." Okay. Like, so I became an accordionist at that point.
So this is how you became the world's greatest accordion player.
Oh, yeah,
right?
the world's greatest, absolutely. Sure.
We should have Nina in here to hang out sometime.
Yeah.
Oh, God. It's horrible.
I've heard you say this before, that you, as an accordion player, you know accordion, but you also know enough to not play accordion.
Well, no, that's the definition of a gentleman.
Oh, I see.
Someone that knows how to play accordion and chooses not to.
Okay, yeah. That's what it is.
I spare the world that horror.
Yeah. I've wanted to watch you play accordion like my whole life. Like as long as I've known you, I've been wanting to see a George Harris accordion session, and I've never seen it.
There's a reason.
Have you ever whipped out the accordion?
Yeah, man. Somebody posted a thing on Facebook not long ago. I didn't remember, but it was from like early '90s session.
Okay.
Where like there was a spot in a song, and I said, "Well, how about an accordion solo?" You know, and I did a little. It wasn't even a solo. It was just like a little interlude in a bridge, you know, of a song.
Yeah.
Just some accordion, and I'd forgotten about that. But I don't play it too often anymore, man. Mm-hmm. I probably should.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a cool instrument, but when you're in Iowa, at least when I was at that time, dude, it was polkas and some polkas. Yeah, a little bit of classical music, a little bit.
Okay.
A little bit. But even the classical music was like William Tell Overture, you know, like just horrific. But it was cool. The good thing about that was I got my reading chops together. I learned to read, and I learned theory. You know, I had to learn how to write music and read music and theory, and that kind of prepared me for, you know, wanting to play Black Sabbath music on a bass or something. Yeah, whatever was next.
So how does that happen? Yeah, how do you go from
paper route, man.
Yeah. For what? So did you just save up for a guitar?
Absolutely. Dude, yeah. I bought a 62 SG for $200. All my paper route money for like getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning for a year.
Yeah.
You know, to go buy this used guitar and learn to, you know, kind of teach myself to play, and a bass too.
Yeah.
I got some kind of off-brand bass that I don't even remember what it was, but you know. And then we moved to Florida, which is kind of where I still am.
Yeah.
You know?
What part of Florida did you move to?
Madeira Beach.
Oh, so you've always kind of been in this area then? Since that point.
Culture shock, man.
Yeah.
From Coralville, Iowa to Madeira Beach, you know. It was just freaked me out.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, you were like suddenly surrounded by water. Yeah.
We had water and like, you know, Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful women. Completely different
than
Iowa.
Yeah, and all the things that go with Florida that are not beautiful women.
Yeah. The swampy stuff.
Like gators.
People. That and just, you know, like the whole culture shock. The culture shock. I'd never met a kid that couldn't read until I came to Florida for high school.
Wow.
Like I'm in high school, and the education up north was just head and shoulders above what it was here.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first shock I got, was like, holy God, man. There are guys here that can't read, that don't like, I mean, it was incredible to me. It was just, you know, I took for granted. I had like almost enough credits to graduate high school when we moved here, and I was in 9th grade. And so I became a troublemaker instantly, right? You know,
why? Because you were just bored.
Yeah. It wasn't really challenging, you know. It wasn't.
Hey.
It's Timmy.
Fucking runner. I'll break a guitar if I run for that.
We'll find him.
We will get him. He will serve.
He gets away today.
So at what point, when did you start like actually playing in rock and roll bands though? So it was here in Florida then, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. First it was, just kind of in my room playing guitar like kids do. Trying to put the needle on the record in the right spot and not scratch it up too much, trying to learn that song or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's not what kids do anymore.
Well, obviously not.
But
no.
But yeah, as kids
there were no YouTube lessons. There were there's nothing, man.
The resources were non-existent.
Yeah, I taught myself to play, and of course I was my technique was just pitiful.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make the sound, I just wanted to
What was the first record you tried to do that to? What was the
man, when we were in Iowa, the first record I got, like, my dad came back to the room one night and he had this 3 or 4 albums, vinyl. And he said, "You ever heard any of these people?" And one of them was this long-haired dude with a beard sitting in a chair with like rolls of carpet next to him and eating an orange or something. And it was the first Eric Clapton solo record.
Yeah.
I had no idea who, I was like, I think I heard that name, like Iowa was pretty far removed from that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
At least at that time. And so he's like, well, these guys left it here. And apparently Clapton had stayed at the motel and left these records. So I actually got the first records I got were Eric Clapton's.
That's awesome.
Like, he just left them in the motel. And years later, man, the tragedy of this story is years later I found out that was a test pressing.
Really?
Yeah, it was like his pressing to, I guess, approve the mastering or whatever,
Yeah.
or just to have whatever. And it had a different take of one of the songs on it. And that ended up being like my school for guitar. Was the first Clapton solo album. And I remember years later hearing like one of the songs come on the radio and going, "That's not right. That solo is different. That's not right." And they'd gone back and replaced it like with a different take of the song. So I had like a take that was never released. And of course I wore it completely to shreds,
Yeah, yeah.
And
I mean, how could you know?
Yeah, no, I know. And it's, it's completely unplayable after that.
Yeah.
So, but it was, that's how I learned, was just wearing out these whatever obscure records I could come in contact with.
I feel like you're like, with that kind of origin story, you're like destined to be a rock and roll.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Like I stumbled upon Eric Clapton's test
personal
pressing.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And also, like, I went to school in Iowa City in grade school to like this really cool ungraded school where the students were teaching. And so there's like college age, kids right out of high school are teaching grade school. And it was ungraded. You'd go in and fill out the little paper at the beginning of the day, like how long are you going to do math? How long are you going to do whatever science? And when I walked home one day, my parents were pretty clear about stay away from the long-haired people because they're hippies and we don't want to get you involved in that. And so, of course, I was really curious about these long-haired hippies.
Right.
Had some as teachers. It was great. But I walked by the student union one time and there's this loud music coming out of the back. The doors are open and there's a bunch of long-haired guys standing around. So I'm like, well, I'm going to go see what. And it was the James Gang. It was like Joe Walsh.
Wow.
Playing sound check in the afternoon at the student union, and I walked back there and heard that, and it was like that moment people talk like, oh,
yeah.
Man, it's like, ooh, this is the shit,
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it too. That was a big, that whole thing happened in Iowa. The weirdest thing,
The weirdest two thing.
Yeah.
So then what was the first band then that you were in?
I don't know. I just played with some friends in the garage like you do when you're in high school.
Yeah.
There's a couple guys. There's one guy that's still around here that I'm in touch with that played bass that, my buddy Steve played.
Mm-hmm.
And the drummer that we played with in high school has passed on. But, most of what I did at that time was like the jazz band in school.
Yeah.
Because that was the other great break of my life was I came down here and I wanted to get into band. I wanted to play bass, right? Because I was doing that more than guitar at the time. So I go to Seminole High School, and John Lamb is the band director, right? John Lamb is, for those of you that don't know, which is probably a lot of people, he was a bassist for Duke Ellington.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Josh was telling us this at the Independent.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was Duke Ellington's bassist, and he taught at the Philadelphia Conservatory. So I spent my high school life trying to impress this guy, which of course is never going to happen.
Yeah,
you know?
right. Yeah.
And I would even bring in records to try and I remember I brought in a Return to Forever record, which was Chick Corea's fusion band, and it had Stanley Clarke playing bass, who's legendary. I said, hey, check this out, Mr. Lamb. Have you heard this stuff? And he picks up the record and he looks at it and he puts it down and he picks up his upright bass and he goes, is that Stanley? Did he say this? And he plays a Stanley Clarke, like this ripping Stanley Clarke thing that I was like, how could you have possibly known that? And he goes, oh man, I taught Stanley, so that was it. Yeah. I was like, oh, yeah. I worship this man.
Yeah. Right.
So you had every experience coming up that indicated to you that music should be part of your life.
Well, I didn't really see any other, I had some other jobs that were cool. I mean, I had a great upbringing, my first job that I ever got was there was a grapefruit grove across the street from our house in Largo. Mm. And there was an old guy named Chester who was a beekeeper, and there was his grapefruit grove. So on the weekends, we had a little stand on the street there, and we sold honey and honeycomb and all that kind of thing. And, bushels of grapefruit and bags of grapefruit for tourists, we'd sit out on the street and sell that stuff. And so my first gig was keeping bees and picking fruit and, taking care of the grove and all that stuff. And it was really cool.
Oh, that is cool.
And there was an alligator that would walk through there at night, and just hang out, go from pond to pond. The stuff that used to happen in Florida before it was built to a ridiculous extent, I mean, this is very near here.
Yeah.
This is probably 2 miles from where we're sitting right now.
Wow.
And so that was a cool job, and I thought, man, I'd like to be part of my other thought was maybe I could be like a marine biologist, or I'd like to do something with that, and it just didn't pan out because I was too absorbed with trying to impress John Lamb.
That's what it all comes
which
back
incidentally
to, right?
Still has not happened.
Yeah. So you're playing in the high school band and everything, and then after high school ends, did you go to college? Did you go to school?
Yeah, well, I went to St. Pete, which was JC then. It was junior college, because John was there, and I wanted to continue. I was playing a great guitar teacher there who was kind of crazy, named Frank Mullen. Mm-hmm. And I kind of took lessons from him, but he was really opinionated and really jazz oriented, and I was into all sorts of stuff, I was into a myriad of music from a young age. And so I couldn't really deal with that too well. And I was so overschooled, to be honest, at that point, man, that the first time somebody said, hey man, you want a road gig? I was like, let me think about that. Yeah. And so I went on the road, I went out and after that I took whatever tour I could get for years, for a couple of years.
What was that first road gig? Do you remember?
It was funny. It was a country gig.
Okay.
It was a band called White Lightning Express, and all the other guys in the band were really old, dude. It was like geriatric cats, they were in their 30s. And it looked that way to me,
Yeah, right.
But they were badasses, they're really good players. And so I went out there and, got my ass handed to me every night. But we got to play these cool gigs where country music was kind of in the toilet in those days. It was kind of beginning this switch to whatever it is now, coming out of Nashville. And we would play our own tunes and our own sets, whatever, some covers and our own kind of stuff for 3 or 4 nights a week. Those were the days when you would go into a club for 5 nights, 6 nights.
You'd have a stint.
and you'd play, or 2 weeks, you know. And then on the weekends at that time, a lot of country artists couldn't afford to tour with a band, so they would just come out and we'd learn their material and back them. So we'd spend a night or 2 nights with these, you know, mostly B grade country acts, you know, because the great guys would still be able to take their bands. But it was surprising how, you know, how many people I got to play with, I got to back that, you know, were kind of down on their careers around that time. So it was very interesting.
Yeah. So that was the first one, was country gigs.
Yeah.
Around what year was this? So people can get some context.
78, 79, something like that.
Cool.
It all runs together. I'm so old. Man.
But I mean, that sounds like a pretty interesting time to be a rock and roll musician, though. You know, or I guess a country musician.
The rock and roll thing was headed in a direction that was really weird at that time, which is why I kind of played the country gig. Yeah, because I didn't feel like, you know, wearing spandex and using hairspray.
Sure.
And
did you wind up ever wearing spandex and using hairspray?
I did wear spandex for a minute.
All right.
Like,
for a minute.
Like I actually had, I think, 1, maybe 2 pair of spandex, and there was one gig where I did wear them, and hopefully there are no pictures from that. But
was it like the Spinal Tap tours where women just losing their minds?
I'd like to think it, but I don't think so.
No.
So if you did generally avoid the spandex thing, where did you wind up going after this stint as a country
I did
musician?
a lot of that country stuff and a lot of like what would be considered jam bands now. You know, a lot of Allman Brothers-ish things and really powerful country bands, which at the time was something, you know, they called it outlaw music then, like Waylon and Willie was happening. And so there was that stuff where you could play pretty powerful stuff in that genre, you know, like we had a drummer with 2 kicks and, you know, and a cowboy hat. Yeah. But it was you know, the band was loud and, you know,
it was heavy.
It was heavier it was, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And then when did you start recording?
Man, I always did that a little bit.
Okay.
I always did. I had a cassette recorder when I was a little kid, and like I used to just record stuff, anything. And I remember my cousin Kyle, who was the singer for SoupBone, when he was a little kid, when he was like 6 years old, I recorded him singing like lullabies and shit like that on my little cassette machine, and I kept that tape until I produced his first record.
Wow.
And when I sent him the first copy, like I sent him like a disc in the mail, I like left like 20 seconds at the end of the record, and then all that stuff came on. Like I put that on the disc, cool. You know. So they're having like a big listening party at his house, and then they're playing. They're like, hey man, great record, right? And all of a sudden it comes on this little kid singing, you know, silly, you know, kid songs. You know, it was him. So I used to do that, like I guess most of my life, you know. And I had the 2 cassette players, and I'd bounce back and forth and add a part, and then I got like a decoder 4-track reel-to-reel, which was big time shit, you know. And the same way all the audio geeks end up in this business.
Yeah.
You know, I did the same thing, man. You know, I'd mix live sounds sometimes when I wasn't playing. You know, there was a time when I came off the road for that I just didn't even want to play anymore. And I just came back here and started working with bands and mixing, and, you know, I'd play a little bit here and there, but I was into the audio thing at that point.
Yeah.
So it just kind of grew into that. I did session work as a player, and I'd always hang out, you know, with the producer or the engineer, like, man, what does that button do? Why does that sound so good when you turn that? You know, like, you know, figure that shit out.
Yeah.
And it just kind of morphed, you know. It was like I got hired by a studio at one point to go in and be a writer and a session musician for a band. It was kind of like a private place, and they had a glam band that like, you know, I definitely wasn't good looking enough to be in. So I was like, I played guitar parts and I would help the producer, you know, and that's where I learned a lot of stuff about multi-track and everything. And, you know, I ended up like living there practically, just being there 20 hours a day,
Jesus.
Because it was there and you could use it, like who
Yeah.
wouldn't, had like a 16-track machine and, a bunch of tape. And I just, hey,
How
man.
couldn't you take advantage of it?
Yeah, and like a
Yeah.
Lin 9000, I could program the drum machine, back in, like the Prince drum machine thing. And so I was like totally into that, man,
No, I feel you. I mean, like if I had a studio, I would never leave there either. You
Yeah.
know, like that's
Yeah, it's serious. It's a serious addiction. It's like drugs, man.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. Especially because it, the problem with studios is like you have to keep upgrading them too, and you have to keep up with the times. So
And at the time, now you could have a studio. You have one of these little boxes. You have a little 2-channel, 4-channel, whatever you have, a little converter box, and a computer, and you have a studio.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great. But at that time, man, it was like stupidly expensive to have audio.
yeah,
It was insane. Like, a 16-track machine was $25,000.
Jesus.
And you had to have a huge console, and tape was $100 a reel or $150 a reel for 16 minutes and 33 seconds of audio.
Wow.
So it was, not many people had home studios when I started.
Yeah.
I had the 4-track and stuff, and that was all right. But to get that big sound, you had to have the 2-inch tape, man. You had to have at least that,
Yeah.
So
I think that's something that people like, especially today, don't realize is that now you can do sort of infinite takes of anything that you want. But back then, you were recording the tape. You had to, that's it.
Yeah.
When
There's
you
an
ran out of
associated
tape, that
cost.
was it.
yeah, and it's valuable to come up in that time when there was like you had 4 tracks,
Mm-hmm.
and you had to decide what you're going to put on, and you had to make the decision like, okay, we're keeping that, period, because it all got mixed together. If you wanted more tracks, you had to bounce it. You had to take the 4 tracks and bounce it to a track on another thing, and then record that on one track, and you could add 3, and then you'd bounce it again, and you do little mixes each time. And then you get to 8 tracks, and then you're like, oh, who's ever going to use 8 tracks? This is great, and of course you'd end up bouncing the 8 track again,
Yeah.
And then you get 16, and it was the same thing until we got to 24. And then when we got to 24, the next step was, okay, now you got to print this time code on one track. That was a new thing. Like the first there was MIDI time code, which you could synchronize your synthesizers and sequencers to the tape. So you didn't have to record them. They could just go straight to the final mix. And you could record other stuff on the other, 22 tracks or something, because you couldn't record right next to code, or you'd lose your code and then your whole thing is gone. But then you got this stuff called SMPTE time code, which is the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineer. And that was the code you see on the bottom of like when they show footage of movies that didn't get used. You see that little, the 8 numbers just flashing real fast by. That was SMPTE time code. And it was minutes, hours, minutes, seconds, and frames for film. So you could synchronize audio to film. So that's when you could synchronize multi-track to film. But you could also synchronize all kinds of stuff to film, like Pro Tools. Like when that came along, when the digital workstations, the initial ones, which were god awful. But there was potential there. Like the editing was just brilliant,
Yeah.
So you could synchronize that to your 2-inch tape and have some extra tracks, and and you could toss stuff into the Pro Tools and cut it up. Like if you had a bad snare hit, you put your snare track in Pro Tools and replace that with a good one, and then put it back on the tape, and you're good to go.
Wow.
And it
So that was brand new.
Yeah. That was I was working with like DigiDesign was the company that did Pro Tools initially, but before that it was called Sound Designer 2, and you had 2 tracks of audio, and it was on one of those old Macs, and you could put like a song in there. You could put your 2 tracks, which could be a stereo mix if you wanted, and you could actually edit and move the things in, and you could hear it, but there was always a little click in there, so you had to render it, which would take 45 minutes, and then if you didn't like it, you had to undo and do it again.
Oh, God.
So it wasn't real popular at first, and but there was potential. You could see the potential. And then when Pro Tools came out, the studio I worked at had the first Pro Tools rig in Central Florida. Right, they went and got it, and I remember the other studios around here, guys going, I don't know why you wasted your money on that. That shit's not going to be worth a damn. And there's a big studio around here that like the owners really gave me grief over that. And 5 years later, they sold their tape machines and had Pro Tools. But
Nay, the naysayers.
yeah. So I went through the whole deal audio wise, which is really valuable.
Yeah, you got to see it change.
Yeah. And see the value of like, do you make a decision? What do you do? How do you, there's value in both sides of that recording. Like you talked about earlier, Randy, the part where you can have unlimited tracks.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of cool. Like you can go sing a song if you're a performance-oriented artist and you're not comfortable with punching in a word at a time or a phrase or in the middle of the lyric or whatever. You just sing through it 10 times and go through and grab the best words or the best line or whatever of each take,
Yeah.
And that's kind of valuable in a way, but it also takes away from the part where you had to be really, really good.
Yeah. You had to be very well rehearsed too.
Yeah, you had to come in and really be good. Like session musicians in the days of analog tape were phenomenal players because you couldn't fix it. What you got was what you got. And 9/10 of the time, they're all in the same room. So there's bleed, all those great old records were done like that. Everybody in the same room. And if you solo the guitar track, you hear the drums. If you solo the drums, you hear the guitar, you hear the bass. You might hear a guy singing in the other room, whatever.
Yeah.
But you balanced for that, And so that was a great way to do it because you knew what the record was going to sound like from the moment you started recording.
Yeah. And I think that's part of what gives a lot of those older records that like that sound,
Yeah, the charm of it.
Yeah.
There was no click track. There was no, you didn't, a lot of them are very imperfect, but that's what, I love that.
Yeah.
I used to sit and just listen to them over and over, listen to my records over and over and go, hey, did you hear that, man? I think the guy said something there. Did you hear that little, oh, listen, man, Jimmy Page played a wrong note, man. Listen to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
point it out to your friends.
Right. So I know you lived in New York for a while too, though, right?
Yeah. I worked at Record Plant right at the end, which is a sad, sad story. But it was a great experience, man. I got to go up there and be involved in that iconic studio, man, in New York City. It was just changing over to somebody bought it and it was called 321 for a minute and then it went under. But it was the place where just about everything that I listened to as a kid was recorded, short of the Muscle Shoals stuff but as far as New York records.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a phenomenal experience.
So at what time did you work at Record Plant?
Like early 90s, late, 90, around there.
Who were some of the artists that were coming through at that time?
Oh, man. There were lots of people. Sabotage was there. Oddly
Really?
enough, when I first went up there, Sabotage was doing a record. And so I'm up there and like my buddies are there. Like, wow, this is weird.
Yeah.
I know Florida people in New York. And but White Zombie was doing a record, Rob Zombie, but it was White Zombie. It wasn't Rob Zombie then. It was the band.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. There was a bunch of crazy stuff going on. Lou Reed was around and just all kinds of amazing stuff.
Yeah, because I've heard so many stories from your Record Plant days. I think, didn't you tell me like Skinny Puppy was there at one point?
No, that was down here.
That was here?
That was at Panda when I was there.
Oh.
It wasn't Skinny Puppy, it was Ogre.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they had kind of been on a hiatus and I worked with him for a minute.
Yeah.
It's a very strange session, very strange experience.
Yeah, I can only imagine. He's an interesting dude. That guy.
Yeah, he's a strange dude.
Yeah.
But it was a thing. That was cool. But that was here. That was in Florida.
Oh, I didn't
of
know
all
that.
Weird things.
So did you come basically straight from New York to Panda?
Well, I was at Panda before I went to New York.
Oh, I didn't know.
And I had a chance to go up there and work and put in this Sound Designer 2 system in John Lennon's old room.
Oh, right.
In the Record Plant. So my first day up there, you go up to the 8th floor and you go down the hall and you go back to this room with cork all over the walls. It was John Lennon's private room. Like his label just bought out a room there at Record Plant, and he just went in there whenever he wanted to work. And it was kind of eerie to go in there and just the vibe of it, you know, like it was kind of intimidating. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the first time I sat on the toilet, he had a private toilet right across the hall from that room.
You sat on John Lennon's toilet?
Right. See?
Yeah, no,
You
no.
get what I feel, you know?
I get
like
you.
I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, and I'm looking at this mosaic tile on the floor, and it's a really cool old room, you know, in Manhattan. I wonder how many songs John wrote right here.
Right on that toilet.
Right. But it was that vibe, you know. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah. Probably a lot of the Yoko Ono songs were written on that toilet.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows, man? I have no way of knowing that, but it was a cool thing to be around that. Kind of made you up your game a little bit just to be around those people.
Yeah.
You know, and all the cats coming through there were all heavyweights. They were
Sure.
all, you know, the engineers were heavyweight guys. You know, there was Jay Messina and Jack Douglas. And although I didn't meet Jack there, oddly enough, I didn't meet either of those guys there. They worked
Really?
there a lot, but I didn't meet them until I got back to Florida.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, but it's you know, it's a small world.
Yeah. It's a small music world.
Yeah.
You know.
Wouldn't want to paint it, but it's a small world.
I think that's one interesting thing too, is like, you know, being in the music industry, everybody always says it's, you know, becomes a catchphrase that this industry is about relationships, you know, that it's about, that's, you always hear that the music industry is about relationships, but nobody really takes that seriously. Nobody really like understands that it legitimately is about, you know, you got to be good to people and then people will be good to you.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I feel like you are a perfect example of the type of person that you really like, you can just see your, you know, George's army of like, you know, network and people that like love you.
If
and,
you live
know,
long enough, you know, you
Yeah.
get that. You get it.
Yeah. Well, like I remember last year when we were looking for a place to stay for South by Southwest, and we're just like,
Right.
George, do you know anybody in Austin? And you made a couple phone calls and we had a house to stay in. You
Yeah,
know?
that's funny.
How does that happen? That's crazy.
Well, see, that was a person I was on the road with in one of those early bands.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like, you know, I hadn't been in touch with her in years.
Yeah. Shout out Hillary, by the way.
Yeah, Hillary.
These fine
Robert.
moments.
Hi, Hillary.
Hillary and Robert.
Yeah. And you know, we had done a bunch of stuff together. We'd been in like little, you know, top 40 bands and been in road bands and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I knew she was there. I'd just gotten in touch with her on Facebook, which is another weird story.
Just Facebook in general.
Well, not just that, but here's the deal. I had health issues for a long time. I have a hereditary kidney disease called polycystic kidney disease, or PKD, and I got a transplant almost 3 years ago. And I hadn't seen Hillary in easy 20 years. And I'm coming out of the hospital at Tampa General, like I'm getting in the car to get taken home, and I'm on serious drugs, you know. I'm on like, you know, morphine and what have you. And my phone rings. I look down and it's like, you know, I don't know this number. Who cares? I'm on drugs. I'm going to answer the phone. And it was Hillary. And it was such a surreal thing. Like I hadn't talked to her in, you know, literally decades, right? And she's like, is this George? Like I was like, holy God, man. You know, and I was like, is this real? Is this really happening? You know, it's this whole surreal deal. So and we ended up hooking up you guys. So that's great. But all this stuff comes around, you know.
Yeah.
Well, that's
part of the deal. You just try to be good to people and
yeah,
it comes around.
Well, and I mean, you've always been good to us. Like, I mean, you're wearing the Black Smoke Theory shirt right now,
Yes.
which was a band that Jason and I were in high school. You know?
Mighty Black Smoke Theory.
Yeah, and that's how we met you. It was actually a recommendation from Al Cohen, who rest in peace.
Right.
Yeah.
God bless him.
He passed away a couple years ago, I think. But Al Cohen suggest I was taking voice lessons from Al, and we were at the point where like, all right, we got a couple songs, we're ready to record, and I was like, who should we record with? And you were the first name that he mentioned. So
Dude, that was a blast too. That was fun.
was it?
Yeah, you guys were wacko, man. High school kids. It was great for me, man.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought was cool. Is like we walked in and it's like you're this serious musician, you know, and like
and there was
Had
the
you
board
fooled.
with
Yeah.
different names for albums.
Yeah,
It could
well,
be anything. It was wonderful.
well,
It
yeah,
was just a wonderland of creativity.
there was stuff that we had like never seen before. Like we had never been in a recording studio, you know.
Right.
So for you to take the time to, you know, record music for a high school band, it's like there's not a lot of engineers that are gonna deal with that.
Oh
kind
yeah,
of shit.
but if you're smart, you do that sort of stuff.
yeah,
Because man, there was what you guys don't get is like I got a lot out of that. Like I get to learn, and you guys came in with this raw energy, man. You know that only
only high
you can
school
only
kids.
have at
Yeah.
that time of your life, man.
Yeah.
You know, because you don't know, so you don't know what you can't do, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than not knowing what you can't do. You know, you're going there fearless, man.
Yeah,
you push
and
the
like
boundaries.
I try to do that now. I always try to be fearless about things. That's one of the things that is a motto for me. Like I want to do something different every time I record. And I loved that, man. You guys were like just like, yeah, man, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that. I'm like, okay, let's figure out how to do that. You know?
Well, I think I remember it. We did a 4-song EP with you first, and I'm pretty sure we only booked one day.
Right.
So
we're
we
gonna
just
finish
walked
this.
in,
We're gonna
like,
finish this in a day.
We're gonna do these 4 songs in
Yeah.
one day, and we had practiced and practiced and practiced, and thought that we knew we could do it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure we did.
You
Like
did.
I think we had to
We
come
did.
back
No, I
from
think
mixing and
we
everything.
came back and did some.
But we tracked the whole thing in a
yeah,
day.
easy.
You know, it wasn't. I don't know if it was very good or
But
not.
see, that's the beauty, man. You didn't know you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So why not do it? You know?
yeah, and we
Come
did.
in and just kill it, you know? Kill it and eat it. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not a lot of bands that would even try that nowadays.
Yeah, well, but that used to be the way records were made. You
That's
know?
true.
Like
Yeah.
when I got to talk to my idols as far as audio engineering stuff, you know, when I got to talk to Tom Dowd and Roger Nichols and those kind of people, and Jack Douglas and Jay Messina and all these great people I've had the opportunity to meet that have helped teach me because they're such cool people. That's the way it was done, man. You know, everybody just came in and it was like kill the guy with the ball.
Yeah.
You know, you had all these great players, and it's like, okay, do it. You know,
Yeah.
press record. You know, that was Tom Dowd's great advice that he gave me in Miami. He was like, yeah, man, I don't care if you're ready or not, always record. Like when they're practicing, when guys are sitting up, just jacking off, record,
Yeah.
because that's where the good stuff's going to happen.
Sure,
You know? And he
yeah.
was so right, man. And see, you guys kind of stumbled into that without knowing that. You know, you guys
Yeah.
had no idea how a record was made or how anything, but this is what we do. We come in and we play.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the way the original stuff was done. That's the way the stuff you loved was done,
yeah.
you know?
And for us, that's all we knew how to do because, you know,
Right.
how else would you do it if you weren't surrounded by your friends in a garage?
A lot of value in that, man.
Yeah.
A lot of value in that.
Yeah.
It's a great thing.
Those were good days.
Yeah, absolutely. I miss that.
So I got to ask, on the record at least,
Ooh.
about the NOLA hat.
Oh, this
Yeah.
is a Harry Connick hat, man.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's from a Harry Connick show. That's all. But I was, you know, like any musician, I have been through a long period of obsession with a certain period of New Orleans music.
Yeah.
Well,
like the
actually, like
meters
most
and-
of New York, most of New Orleans, New Orleans music. You know, back to Professor Longhair and
yeah.
James Booker, you know, the piano guys, and even like Dixieland, you know, that kind of stuff a lot of it came from there. One of the first shows I ever saw in my life was Louis Armstrong. My grandfather took me to see the Dukes of Dixieland when I was a kid. I was a little kid. And it just stained me forever, you know. it just got embedded on me, you know.
Yeah.
And so I you know, became obsessed with the meters for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, Jesus, that's like it's like the well of where everything comes from. It's that area. There's so much good stuff, man. So much, so many great players, and so much where it's all about just the feel and the groove and all those great, and Alan Toussaint, all those great records that came out of there, man.
Yeah.
Just amazing stuff that had no right coming out of there, because there was no like proper huge studio like LA or even Muscle Shoals or New York or wherever. There was nothing like that in New Orleans. There were these little huts where they recorded stuff, man. And they made these amazing records, these amazing statements, because the talent was there. I mean, Ray Charles was there. That's where he learned to play stride piano. That's where he was when he got signed to Atlantic. He was coming out of New Orleans, where, after Florida, incidentally, Ray was a Tampa guy too.
Yeah. We've had that conversation
previously with John Capuya.
Yeah. Wow.
So, if at some point in almost, I guess, I don't know, in most musicians I know in their lives, you got to go, you got to study that stuff.
Yeah. So that's your nod to Nola.
Yeah. And I just love that stuff, man. I love that period. I love the meters and, like I said, Dr. John, man.
Yeah.
Holy God.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff, all that whole scene, man, the Neville brothers, and I've been lucky enough to like meet some of these guys and get to figure out how they played this stuff. I got to work with Leo Nocentelli from the Meters at a club when I got to mix his band.
Yeah.
And that was like, I wasn't sure I wanted to touch that, man. I was like, Jesus, what if I screw it up?
Yeah.
This is Leo Nocentelli, man. What if I screw up?
Right.
It was a blast, man.
So meeting all these people over the years, what is there a particular piece of advice or a life philosophy or something that has stuck out for you?
I wish I had one. I never had like I was never smart enough to set a goal and just say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go to this place. And it kind of just fell at me. You end up following some path and that leads to your next thing, whatever it is. And I've always been of the opinion where you kind of accept those gifts, like if a song comes to you, you write it down, because they might not, it's like getting a Christmas present. If you just set it aside, that guy's not going to give you a Christmas present next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you accept those things and there's a path in that, it's kind of, I guess that's from my childhood, from growing up with the Native American cats.
Yeah. Was that you just sort of just let the universe kind of
figure
things out?
Yeah. I had I guess I still kind of am that way. But it's all these things have led to what they've led to, and it's certainly not what I would have planned at any point. I mean, when I was a kid, I never would have guessed I'd be recording music and mixing records and stuff.
Yeah.
Here
you are.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't, I always read the credits on my albums and I was always, I was very into that, but I always thought I'd be the guy, playing and writing and stuff. And I still do a certain amount of that. But, I was lucky enough to get into the other side of it. And has its own reward. That's a great thing too.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody that's, looking to get into the recording arts?
Man, I have no idea now.
That's a great thing to say though.
Yeah. I mean, in my day, it was like, like seriously, you would go to a studio and if you were smart, you found one that like did stuff you liked. Like if I would have been smart, I would have gone to New York and, lived on the street and interned at Record Plant.
Yeah.
But I wasn't. I was doing what I did and things came as they came. And but what you did in those days was you just went in and you cleaned the toilets and you went for lunch, and you shut up. You didn't say anything. You sat in the back of the room really quietly and watched what the real guys were doing.
Yeah.
And then, if they got sick, you kind of knew you could step up a step. You know, you got to be the assistant engineer instead of cleaning the toilets. Now you got to be the guy that wrote down the settings at the end of the session and charted everything, kept track of the takes and all that. Meanwhile, you got to sit a little closer to the console so you could see what the real guy was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you could sit with the producer and kind of get like how people work, how you get a better performance out of an artist, all those kind of things. And then when the engineer got sick, you got to sit at the console and actually touch the faders, which was like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, I get to touch this huge thing, you know, it's great. But now, man, now it's a whole different path, you know, not that that's not still valid.
Yeah.
Like I would encourage anybody to seek out Jay Messina and do whatever you have to do to sit there while he mixes a record and watch him.
Yeah.
You know, or you know, Jack Douglas or any of the great people that are out there. There are a million amazing, talented people making records.
Yeah.
But try to find the guys that have been there a long time, that went through a lot, and sit there and watch everything they do, man. And you know, if you're lucky enough, get to ask some questions about why and what works, and you know, what should I do, and et cetera. You know, and most people that are in this industry are really helpful. Like there are a few guys that are really secretive that don't want to talk to you about, you know, oh, this is my thing, I don't do, you know, but
Yeah.
But the thing is, even if you do things exactly the same as somebody else, the result is not the same. That's the beauty of music, is you could follow an exact formula and it's never the same because of the person involved, the personalities involved.
Yeah.
So, you know, most of the guys that I was lucky enough to meet and talk to about engineering were cool enough to just say, yeah, here's what I did on this, and here's what I did on that, you know, and here's the reason I like this, and here's the reason I like that, and the theory of it, you know, which is awesome.
Well, and now I would think that, you know, with the social media and the internet, it's almost easier to find those people.
Oh, yeah.
And ask questions
Absolutely.
and get connected. You know?
Absolutely. It's like same thing with playing an instrument, you know?
Yeah, that's
Go
true.
on YouTube, you can get a visual lesson in how to play anything you want.
Yeah.
You know? And it's not as much of a struggle to find it that you were playing the wrong note for 10 years or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Or singing the wrong words to a song that you heard on the radio because you couldn't understand it, you know, and there was no way to get the lyrics.
Right,
you know,
right. There was no rap genius back then. Or
right.
anything. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah, so it's great now. Now you have, you know, and again, it's kind of like, I probably shouldn't say this, but it's kind of like the rest of the world. We have the knowledge of the world at our fingertips, and we use it for like porn and cat videos.
that's about the extent of it. And
I
memes.
mean, that's you know what I mean.
yeah. It's true.
It's scary.
But
It
what
is
else?
scary.
What else would we do if not for porn and cat videos?
Oh, you might learn, you know,
Yeah, you might learn new languages or something.
you know, nuclear physics or something, you know.
Yeah.
The resources are available, man. Anyone can do anything.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like two of the guys that I got to sit with and, or at least talk to, you know, about what I do, about studio stuff,
Yeah.
were nuclear physicists, and they made great records.
Wow.
You know, like Tom Dowd, who was, in case you don't know, go look this guy up. There's a movie about him. It's easy to find out. He was Atlantic Records, man. He was the guy that built studios for all these people. He was Aretha Franklin and the Allman Brothers and Cream and John Coltrane and you know, you name it. Just about every, you know, he was the guy that took Dwayne Allman to meet Eric Clapton, and later that night they came back and started Derek and the Dominoes.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like, you know, he's a piece of history, and he was a nuclear physicist and the coolest guy in the world. And he was not afraid to like take some stupid kid that met him in a break room at a studio and show him where he put the microphones on the Derek and the Dominoes record, or how did you record Disraeli Gears? Well, this mic was 6 feet from Clapton's amp because it was so damn loud. You know? But you know, that was the deal in my time. That's the only way you could find this stuff out. Like there were big secrets because you just couldn't meet all these people.
Yeah.
You know, the country was too big and there wasn't an internet. So, yeah.
Yeah. Information was just harder to come by.
Yeah. But now it's cool. Now you can get online and learn a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
It's just what you choose to do with it, man. You know, that's the bottom line with any of this crap that we're talking about is like, what are you going to choose to do with it?
Yeah.
You know, are you going to do Cash Me Outside or, you know, are you going to do a symphony? You know, it's up to you. I'm not implying that there's more value in either one.
Yeah.
At least not officially. But, you know.
So recently we put out through our Cigar City management label services the one of my favorite albums of all time, SoupBone's SoupBone's self-titled
SoupBone
album, SoupBone, which was a band you were in back in 2010, 2011.
I have no idea.
Okay. But it was you and Kyle, who has like one of the best voices I've ever heard.
Well, it didn't start with me and Kyle, oddly enough.
Really?
It started before Kyle moved down here.
Oh.
That started with me and a guy named Manny Yanez.
Oh, yeah. I know Manny.
Manny's like one of the great bassists of the world.
I remember meeting him at Panda, actually.
I met him at Panda. He gave me one of the most frequently used guitar exercises I ever used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's the cat, man. And we started, you know, he had lived in New Orleans quite a while. And Manny left here at an early age to go play with like legendary people. Like, he was in Iron Butterfly when he was 16. You know, he did 9 years with Patti LaBelle. He played with Robert Palmer. He played with the Neville Brothers.
Yeah, so Manny's a badass.
Oh, yeah, and has a unique groove to his playing that I SoupBone almost didn't happen because I couldn't get him. Like, we wrote a bunch of that stuff together.
Yeah,
and I was such a prick to every bass player that auditioned for that band.
Really,
I really was. I want to acknowledge that in public because I was a dick because they couldn't play like Manny. You know, nobody could play that groove properly. And, you know, we ended up, I don't want to say we settled, but we found a guy that worked out great and, you know, played live a little bit. But that was the deal. Like early, we just wrote these things as like groove exercises.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we were trying to be the meters.
Okay. Yeah.
And we wrote these little grooves and stuff and put them together and got Mark Dupuis to come in and play drums on weekends to what was then just these grooves. And we would just play them for long periods of time and record them. And I ended up cutting that stuff up into songs. You know, well, this sounds like a verse, this sounds like a chorus, this sounds like. And then when Kyle came down, I got the idea of like, well, why don't we make this the band?
Yeah.
You know, and originally it was just guitar, bass, drums, and Kyle singing. But when we recorded, we had everybody come in.
yeah. Like there's so many people played on that.
Oh
record.
yeah, man.
Yeah.
Like Mark Radice, who's a great piano player from up north. He actually did Aerosmith tours and stuff as a keyboard player. I worked with him on a record, and you know, on some downtime, I was like, dude, you mind playing a song? Like, I got this. Like, you got some chops. You could play this. So he played on the record, and then Ross Rice, who is like a god among men and a force of nature in himself, had a band called Human Radio in the, I guess, 80s. Was it 80s or 90s? But phenomenal band, way too good to be popular, unfortunately.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
Yeah, but Ross is mega genius, and check out his solo records. Go buy Ross Rice's stuff because it's brilliant. Anyway, we got him down here. I was working on some records with him, which was like, you know, another one of those great moments for me. I get to meet my heroes.
Yeah.
And it worked out that we got to, through a great friend of mine named Alan Craig, we worked out a deal where he could play on the SoupBone record. And then Rob Stoney came in, who I was playing with at the time, and him and Ross would play together at the same time in the studio. And you know, we just got we lucked into having all these great guest artists come and play. Dave Reinhardt played drums on a couple tracks, and Rob McDowell played bass on one, and Vince Caruso played on one. There's all kinds of guys on this record,
Yeah.
you know. But then we went out and played as a trio for a while until Rob decided to join. And it was fun. It was a fun time.
It was
crazy music.
Yeah. I remember there was one show that I went to see you guys at. It was definitely in Clearwater, but like not near the beach, like Clearwater.
It's probably $2.
I think it was $2.
Smokiest bar in the world.
Yeah. And I was definitely under 21, but might have even been under 18 at the time. And
no, you weren't.
No. Definitely under 21. And they didn't like, we weren't even allowed into the bar when we got there.
Right.
But I was like, oh, well, we drove all this way just to see SoupBone. And they were like, really? You wanted to see these guys? I was like, yeah, actually. They're like, okay, you can stay for the first set and then you have to go. And that's what I did. That was my only time seeing SoupBone was I saw
those guys were so nice, man. They would hire us whenever we had, they would just, that's kind of where we played because we played such weird stuff that we didn't fit in the bar scene at all because we were playing like, this wacky country music and meter songs and stuff. And
well, that's why I had to come out and see it. And that was the only place I could. But luckily, like I said, they let me sit in for half of your show.
Yeah, that's cool.
But so that record now is officially on iTunes and Spotify and all over the internet. So you can go and find SoupBone and listen to it.
And ignore it like the rest of the world.
But it really is like, honestly, it's been a record where since it came out, like, you know how CDs are nowadays. It's like I don't even know where I could find one of my CDs. So it's like I had the SoupBone album, uploaded it into my computer, then I sent it to Andy, and then Andy like had it on Dropbox, which was good because when my computer crashed, I was able to get it back from Andy on Dropbox. Right. And then then Jason had it, and it kind of like went around, like the album kind of floated, but we never, I don't know where the original source of the album was,
Right.
So
but we've been listening to it for years.
Yeah, but like nonstop. Like every time I would get a new phone, I would make sure to like go into iTunes and load up my SoupBone record so that if I just needed to listen to Take Your Drunk Ass Home or something, I was ready.
So seriously, if you listened this far, go to iTunes and buy it.
Yeah, definitely, because you won't regret it.
Yeah, so these guys can make a couple bucks.
Pretty much.
Couple pennies.
Yeah, a couple pennies. Fractions of a penny.
Yeah.
Fractions of a penny.
We get our 100th of a cent per copy.
Yeah, exactly. But it really is like, a record that I love, that I go back to just because the songs are so good. And like you said, that groove is like, it really is kind of...
Yeah, there's some weird grooves on there.
Yeah, it really is a love letter to New Orleans. I mean, there's a song New Orleans on there.
Yeah,
it's
that's what it was, man. It was my little period of obsession.
Yeah,
that I was lucky enough to bring people into.
Yeah, and I'm glad now we can keep bringing ourselves into it and keep listening to it. And I always mention Take Your Drunk Ass Home, but that's there's so many good songs on that.
Right, but that song should be played at every bar at closing time in the country.
I totally agree.
It should, yeah.
I mean, that's what it's about. So all you guys that have bars, when you want to clear the bar out, put that song on because it's horrible enough that people will run screaming.
They'll run for the exits.
Jesus, what is this? Let's get out of here.
So we're going to close this episode out with a track from the SoupBone record.
Oh, good.
So which one would you like us to...
You got to do that one now.
Take Your Drunk Ass Home?
You got to,
I guess. I mean, it's the end of the show.
Only way to
that's
close
how
anything.
That's the only way.
What else are you going to use, man?
Yeah. So you want to give a little more context to this one, or do you want to just let it play us out?
Yeah, this one started with... I had just bought a guitar. My mom had passed away, and I bought my first cool, semi-expensive vintage guitar.
Yeah,
and it was a Fender Esquire, and then it wasn't even a whole Esquire; it was a parts caster with a 56 Esquire neck, and a great guitar. Just had it just talked to me. It was full of songs, and I got that the riff for Take Your Drunk Ass was one of the first things I ever played on it, and I put that into song form as an instrumental to play at my favorite bartender's birthday party at a club in Clearwater. One year, went out there and did that, and kind of wrote the song for her. And I've been living with her for 16 years now. So it kind of worked.
Yeah.
Later on, we went and wrote the lyric kind of about that thing. Like when you hear this, you realize it's about a guy that pesters a bartender, you know, like, just give me one more little drink. I'll go home. I just want one more little drink, please. You know, because it was close to, I lived like down the street from this club at one point, you know, and Kyle and I lived there with his wife. And it was just about stumbling distance, as we say, from the house. Yeah. So, you know, we were kind of late night drunks for a while. And that's kind of the context of it. That's the deal.
That's
and
great.
Brilliant Manny Yanez bass line. You have to say that. And I think Rob Stoney's on this one, and I'd have to look. I don't pay attention to this stuff anymore.
How can you? You've made so many records. Well,
no, it's just that, you know, I just haven't even looked at that record in years. And I'm not the guy that listens to the stuff I've done.
Yeah, you put it away.
It's hard for me to go back and hear it.
Well, we're going to hear it now.
There you go.
So as promised, here's your fade out. Take Your Drunk Ass Home by SoupBone.
Sitting here quite a while now. You keep on telling me about your life, that you're telling your boss where he can put his goddamn job. Oh, then you're bitching all about your wife. Just go home, leave us here alone. Take your drunk ass home. Take your drunk ass home. Take your drunk ass home. Take a cab, take a train, take a boat or a plane. Just get your dumb ass go, get a dumb home. Take your drunk ass 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 home. I've been standing here all night long, just watching you fade as you try to work it all out. You're getting, the more I'm thinking, well, they're kicking your drunk ass out. Oh, yeah. So take your drunk ass home. Would you just go home and leave us here alone? So take your drunk Let's close in time, get the hell away from me, yeah. Thank